Welcome to our episode on choosing to belong. Have you ever felt that you just don't belong? Have you wondered why that loneliness is there? In this episode, we share from our own experiences of feeling alone and how we each decided and chose to belong.
Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to our long overdue episode on this concept of choosing to belong. And the inspiration for this episode comes from the years of working with women doctors who feel like they don't belong. And I would literally say that I think almost every woman in medicine at some point has decided they don't belong. And to be fair, we didn't belong in medicine when we first showed up there. And there are many rooms in which we don't belong or don't fit in. But our lens of seeing this is everywhere. And in talking to women in medicine, it is very commonly the thing that people really wish were different. They don't want to feel alone. They don't want to feel isolated, and they do want to feel like they belong. And when people show up in group coaching and in retreats, invariably people start to notice how they don't belong. There's a little bit of compare and despair. I'm the only primary care, or I'm the only not primary care, or I'm the only one married or not married, or with children or not with children, or without a friend, or whatever it is. We find the pattern differentiator and lean into it. And we use it to sort of protect ourselves. In training, we were taught to notice how we don't belong and chameleon ourselves into belonging in any space, whatever the specialty is. And for many people, whatever the hospital is, because you change hospitals all the time. And so it becomes a trait in us that is very expensive emotionally and energetically. And we've never done a podcast on it. So today is that day. I, as many of you know, also spent a whole year of 2025 working on belonging, because it is something you can choose and something you can practice. And here we're going to talk about choosing it, but choosing it is one thing and actually feeling it is another. And it takes practice, and it takes an intentional unwiring of wanting to belong and noticing where you're always falling short in that, with this feeling that maybe you don't. And so I spent this year deciding very intentionally where I belonged. Every stage, every group, every conversation, I literally decided to notice how I belonged. What was the same about me than other people? Or why did I belong there? Even if there were a myriad of reasons as to why I didn't. And I also want to offer that this sense of not belonging, a sense of aloneness, I think many of us think that when we finish residency, it will go away. And I actually think it's worse after we finish residency, because in our training, we belong to a community where everyone's working through the same thing. And when we finish, it's actually much more isolating. We have more time, but we have less belonging and more aloneness and more loneliness, because we don't always have the people around us. And instead, the just sense of taking care of one another and being in it together vanishes. So our invitation of this episode is desperately hoping that we can all choose that we belong, and that when we choose that we belong and when we choose that we're not alone and isolated, medicine and life are a lot easier.
So we're literally in medical school and in training taught to become experts at what does not belong in the normal distribution, from lab results with that normal range to imaging findings like, oh, there's something that's not supposed to be there, physical exam findings, what's normal, what's abnormal. Oftentimes there's an extra sound or an extra whoosh in like a heart sound. And even in the history, like what is alarming about this history. We became experts at noticing what didn't belong. Our negative attention bias became really, really honed in, for good reason, in medicine, because what didn't belong in all of that could mean something bad was going to happen or was already happening. And so no wonder that fine honing and hard work of training, that lens that we've basically been carving out, has been turned upon ourselves as well.
Yeah. Say that again, because I think it's so important, right? We think it's very helpful in derm or path or in peds. You know, we notice what's different or what's not following the usual. But we are
using that same lens and turning it upon ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder, like, duh, of course.
It's a mic drop moment, though, because that's not how it's explained to us. And we don't even appreciate that that's what we're doing. We're just so good at it that we also turn it on ourselves and thinking that if we don't belong, it's dangerous.
Right. And it's no wonder that is happening, is that we spent literally decades training to do that. And then we're practicing it every day when we're in medicine. And so I got curious in doing some reflection about this episode about why I was feeling like I didn't belong. So much earlier in life, because I think both you and I have basically just decided we have granted our own sense of belonging simply because. But earlier in life, when I was less sure of myself, when I had less self-esteem and confidence, I definitely was very, very, very hard on myself, especially before cancer. I was much more externally focused on acquiring external validation for my worth and very materialistic. Like I felt like I wasn't as pretty, I wasn't as thin, I didn't have as nice a designer purse or shoes, and I didn't have as nice of a hairstyle or skin. I didn't feel like I had as many friends, or I feel like I didn't belong, and really fell into that compare and despair, negative attention bias mindset on myself. Internally, I felt like I wasn't as smart, I wasn't as well-spoken or as eloquent. This showed up, and it rears its ugly head occasionally in groups that I am involved with, like in school parent groups or volleyball mom groups, even some physician conferences, ironically, that were meant for helping with well-being. And because as an introvert, for me, I've used that as an excuse and a reason for saying that it's been hard to make new friends. In the earlier years, I definitely felt much more of the sense of feeling alone. But after years of therapy, some coaching thrown in there, and honestly, a little bit of desensitization therapy of simply putting myself out there, even when I was scared to do so. As I've gotten older, as my 15th cancerversary has gone and passed recently, as my family life has gotten a lot busier with really being in a sandwich generation, I honestly haven't had as much mental or emotional currency to spend on feeling all of those things, on feeling lesser than, on feeling not enough, and ultimately on feeling like I didn't belong.
And I'm guessing we'll talk about this later, but when you don't spend the energy on that, you have so much energy to spend on other things that are so much more fun and like things that you can accomplish and be a part of and enjoy. The other thing that you have done, and I have done, and I encourage people to do is, yes, there is coaching, yes, there is therapy, but mindfulness you didn't mention. So I'm going to throw it out there, like the awareness of this tendency because it's the awareness of the tendency that allows it just loses its power. I always say the awareness is like 80% of it. So if you notice this habit, literally, of noticing that you don't belong, it loses its power, and you can then intentionally start to do some things that we'll talk about later. How do you practice this? But if you don't even notice that that's your default brain thought, you can't change it.
Mm-hmm.
And my story about why I did not belong, I was trying to think of the reasons after you started talking about why you didn't belong. And I was like, I don't think I had a story. I literally just was like, it was a feeling of not belonging. And what I think it is equivalent to is the discomfort. So if I was uncomfortable, it meant I didn't belong.
Mm.
And were uncomfortable in new settings, or if I didn't know people, or if I didn't know what to do, I would equate that with not belonging. And I would also equate it with danger, because in medicine, if you didn't belong, then it was dangerous, right? Something terrible could either not usually happen to the patient, but happen to you. Like if you didn't belong on rounds, or I guess I didn't belong on the surgery team, so I couldn't be a surgeon. And I didn't belong on this, so I couldn't do that. And it was like all of these opportunities just being stripped away. So there's a lot of sympathomimetic storm and fear in there. But to me, this not belonging was literally like unfamiliar discomfort. I think I equated it with not belonging, which is so interesting. The other thought I have is that very early on in my life, and most people don't know this about me, but it's kind of a fun story. My parents did study abroad as their job. And they would take students to Mexico for 6 months for fall semester. And my brother and I would be pulled out of school, and this is what we would do. And we just didn't go to school during that time period. People say, oh, you were homeschooled. I'm like, oh, no, we were not homeschooled. But my parents first thought that maybe they would send us to school in this tiny little rural village. Well, at the time, I was a towhead blonde, and everyone there did not look like me. But my older brother looks very different than I do for a lot of complex reasons, which we won't go into today because that'll be an even longer story. But he looked like he fit in. Mm-hmm. Naturally, his physical appearance. But I was a fair-skinned towhead blonde. And people actually teased me and pointed at me. They had never seen anyone that looked like me in this rural Mexican village. And it was really traumatic. And I came home and said, I'm never going back there, which I didn't. And my hipster Berkeley parents said, fine. And I spent the fall, in the market negotiating for, bargaining for little dollhouse things and reading Nancy Drew, and it all turned out fine. And accompanying my dad on his field trips, but it was very traumatic for me. And so I also wonder if that has kind of stayed with me as the belonging is a threat. And that just came up in this moment. I was like, I wonder if that's part of it. On the other hand, I think this feeling of not belonging is so common in women that I work with, and it resonates with almost every woman you talk to. So this idea of feeling like you belong and not feeling alone, who knows where it came from? And at this point, who cares, right? It's like, how do we want to move forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you were bringing that up, it kind of triggered some memories of definitely walking into meeting spaces where I'm like, oh, I'm the only East Asian person here. Oh, I'm like one of 3 women here. And that noticing first what is not the same has been ingrained in us for the reasons that we just noticed, but evolutionarily, it's been ingrained in us. And so, belonging in the Ice Age, belonging when we were living in caves as human beings, that was life or death. But now in the 21st century, we don't necessarily have to ascribe to those old patterns of hardwiring. So this is a bit of a choosing to unlearn, as hard as that might be, and simply deciding, and really it's practicing that we're choosing to belong.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about how you decide. We'll talk about deciding first and practicing second.
Well, you, besides having no time to decide and be as curious as I used to be, or even thinking about, I don't think there was one discrete time that I noticed that and decided that, well, wherever I choose to show up is just where I belong. It's frankly empowering and very intentional. And honestly, I kind of don't care anymore if I'm seen as belonging or not. Like there's this like
Well, see,
ambivalence to that.
it's not an issue. And I actually want to point out, when I brought up this topic, you said, well, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, I
And
was
I was like, well, what
okay,
about
well,
this
what
whole
about it?
phenomenon? And she was like, oh. And,
I'm
and
like,
I
well,
think
what
when she
about
started
it?
to think about it, it was like, yeah, I actually like worked on this. But for you, it's almost like that decision of, I'm just putting it down. It's not going to be an issue for me.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter anymore for
Yeah.
me. Like, and it's actually very, now you're like forcing me to reflect upon it, Jessie.
Yeah.
But like it's very empowering and it's very light. Like I feel light about
I
it.
want you to celebrate it, because when I met you 6 or 7 years ago, this was not the way you looked at things.
Very true. Very true. And I don't really know what shifted, but like, yeah, maybe it's the years of mindfulness practice, the therapy and coaching, like, and just showing up authentically, regardless of the situation.
It's the podcast. I don't know what it is either. But
We've both chosen
yeah,
to show up and just simply believe that we belong because we're choosing it, right? Like we're
Right.
choosing where to show up.
I actually think both of us lean in heavily now to how we're different and how we're unique, because that's actually much more fun. And that's an antidote to the not belonging that I think is actually probably the most powerful, is just choosing to notice how you're different and choosing to notice how you're unique and choosing like, well, what can I bring to this world that nobody else can, whether it's a very specific perspective or the childhood that you had. Because I think we all bring a different lens. And when we did the episode about imposter syndrome, right, it's like these are all different doors. And so we all can bring something of value. And when you shift your lens to that, the belonging actually just washes away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like where I'm choosing to spend my time, energy, emotional currency, like that's where I am choosing to belong. So
Well, yeah, I just want to point out, actually, I have a new thought. I'm not sure we're choosing to belong. We're choosing to not belong. But it's a double negative, right?
negative, but it's slightly
But that's the reality of what's actually happening. It's just not an issue. It's not a thought anymore.
right.
But it does take practice. And I think if you are someone who notices how you don't belong, or even if you feel alone or lonely, which is the consequence of not belonging, or thinking that there's something wrong with you, or that you're not enough. In the women physician conversation, this comes up a lot with like friends, or being at a parent event of, stay-at-home moms, and you feel like you don't fit in, or it's hard to make friends, and so therefore there must be something wrong with you. We have an episode on why it's hard to make friends, and it has nothing to do with not belonging. There are a lot of circumstantial reasons why it's hard to make friends, but we talk about it in that episode. This idea of how we don't belong and don't fit in is really the thing that gets in our way of making friends. Because you could just decide that you're there and everybody's interesting, and you bring something and they bring something else, and stepping out of the compare and despair, and there you are.
Yeah, if you show up just as you are, it's very refreshing and much more energy efficient.
Yes, and refreshing for the other people too.
Yeah.
Right, because it drags everybody down, that energy. So a couple of things in practicing belonging. Number one is noticing how you do belong. And I like to think like noticing how you're similar than other people. And I would say stop noticing how you don't belong. I think that's probably the most impactful thing. And I literally spent a year thinking about this, about how I did belong, and noticing, like, stop noticing what was different and started noticing what was the same.
So you chose to switch from our predetermined DNA set point of negative attention bias into positive attention bias.
Yes.
And I'm going to mention here that on a biologic level, there's more things similar amongst human beings than there are differences. And so by nature of existing as a human being, we all belong to common humanity. Yeah. And I want to highlight and underscore that we already belong simply because we exist.
Yeah, as a human, right? We belong to the human race. And then I'm thinking, like, if you're in a group of women, well, you belong because you're a woman. And if you're in a group of mothers, no matter what they do for a job and no matter what they're wearing, you belong by that virtue, right? And so whatever it is, you're a pulmonologist. Because you're a pulmonologist, you belong in the pulmonologists, right? But we're like, why don't I fit in, as opposed to why do I fit in? You all did the fellowship, or you all went to medical school. I think it's a really powerful way to notice. I often point out at my retreats, like, you're all women, you're all physicians, so you all belong here. And you all also self-selected to do this thing that's very unique and different. So therefore you belong here, right? Like, it's not the easiest path to end up here. It actually takes some conscious work to show up here. So therefore you all belong. I also think some other like easier strategies is to become a regular somewhere, because that does give you get that, what does it feel like to belong? So notice the places that you go where you do belong, and notice what it is about that. That can be really, really helpful. Or, in my family, you would go different places, you travel different places, but notice how amazing it feels when you go back to a place that your family's gone before, where you feel comfortable. And so just looking at those things, or maybe it's the coffee shop, or maybe it's the, now I no longer live there, but we used to have a local grocery store, and like the owner was a small, local business, and he knew everybody. And I loved going there because I did feel that just sense of, it's funny because I wouldn't have said the word belonging, but warmth and comfort and safety and community. And I definitely never felt alone in that grocery store, which is odd. But I'm like, that's what it means to belong. And so if you have a space where you're a regular, or even if the word regular doesn't come to mind, place where you feel just so comfortable and very safe, and that sense of a warm hug, you won't feel it the first time you go in, but you'll feel it. It's a sense of familiarity, if that makes sense. And I just want to offer that the people who you see who have these sort of villages that you're jealous of and the compare and despair, well, they honestly decided they belonged. It's as simple as that. They just decided this was a good place for them to be. And it's very odd, but just see what happens when you decide it, and see what happens when it feels good. And I will say, actually, I'm saying this a little bit for accountability, but a year or so ago, I was going to this women's group in my new neighborhood and intentionally trying to make friends. And at that time, I went to a bunch of their events and got to know people. And then I've kind of gotten distracted by other things, and potentially a lot of retreats and traveling and giving talks. And so I haven't been, but I told them I was going to come to a thing next week, because I have a summer pause right now, intentionally scheduled, and I'm so excited about it. So I'm going to go, and I'm nervous about it because I feel like I don't belong because I was there and then I kind of disappeared. But my story is not going to be that after this podcast. I'm going to build my village, and I'm going to decide that, of course, I belong, because they're still inviting me. I still get the invitations because I'm still on the list. And anybody who wants to come can come when they do these different events. And this one's at a flower farm, which is really why I'm going, because I love flower farms. And it's right near me. It's actually my neighbor's flower farm, so I really want to see it, and I think it's my chance to get in and see it. But again, like, if I just start thinking about those other things, I'm out of that story of don't belonging. And I will tell you that as soon as I feel like I don't belong, I don't want to go anymore. And then I feel alone and isolated, right? So it's the choice. And when you feel like you belong is the other thing I just want to say. Like, you feel completely different. You mentioned that sort of lightness and just energy and sparkle. And I think everything feels lighter. Your nervous system is much more balanced. You regulate better, even when things get out of balance. And, life starts feeling like it's not as much of a challenge. And it seems like it's just a little thing, but I think both of us would say that decision is actually not a little thing.
No, I think it took many, many years of hard work.
Yes.
And decisions, not easy decisions. What I wanted to share was, as part of being intentional about building your own village, is to be intentional about reaching out and introducing yourself. So like for me as an introvert and being a bit more soft-spoken, prior versions of me and current version of me when I'm in a new group environment, I now put myself in my zone of discomfort and will introduce myself, even if it initially feels uncomfortable. But I know that in not doing so, I will likely feel like I don't belong, and that sense of loneliness will settle in. But I can change that story and simply take a chance, be vulnerable, put myself out there, and say, hello, my name is, and start a conversation. As difficult as that used to be for me. The other aspect about conversations, and also part of why I continue to do this podcast after many, many years, is that the sharing of vulnerability can be a really strong, powerful connector. And that can really break down a lot of walls of judgment, preconceived notions. It can bring about other people's authenticity pretty darn rapidly. And honestly, for me, how I have and continue to share vulnerably, which I will continue to do so, is part of why I continue to do that is because I never know who I might also be helping. Helping not just from a mindset perspective or a commiseration perspective, but also helping you, dear listener, to feel like you belong simply by listening to our podcast.
Yeah. Well, and I say very often vulnerability is valuable, which it is just by putting it out there. And I think it's valuable to the one who's vulnerable, and it's valuable to others as well, because it gives them permission. But I do think to be vulnerable, that you have to decide that you belong and you're safe at this, like all at the same time, if that makes sense. They all kind of come together. It's fascinating. And I want to touch on what you just brought up about the podcast, because we've been doing this now for over 5 years, and we're on, I can't remember what, 300 and something. And that's a lot of podcasts. And
Count.
Like, why do we keep doing it? And I think the crux of it is really to share vulnerability. And we don't want this to just be kind of the same podcast where you just have zillions of guests and they promote things. Like, that's not what this is about at all. It's really about showing up as real, authentic people and sharing lived human experience and tools that can help you move through this human life with more grace. And both of us try on purpose to be really vulnerable. The episode about my recent communication snafus, it's very, and wins, is vulnerable. And yet I think when you tell real stories and you share things in that moment, even if they don't sound like an elegantly organized, well thought out podcast, they're the ones that we often get the most feedback on. And I will encourage all of you that if you listen to the podcast and you find some of this helpful, you can, first of all, leave a review saying how helpful it is, because that helps us and that will help us keep doing it. But also send us an email. We actually like to hear it. It incentivizes us. And energizes us, that's the better word, to continue on this journey. The other tidbit worth mentioning is you were talking about introducing yourself. And I just wanted to talk about the power of introducing and connecting others, and being that web of connection not only helps others feel like they belong, but you feel like you belong. And so it creates these, I have found it to be one of the most energizing things about what I do is helping people connect. And I love being sort of the connector, but I'm also in that web, and I'm also connecting to all these people. And it just is really a beautiful human thing. And it gets you out of that brain, the competitive brain that we were trained to have as physicians, and the danger brain. It's really very much coming from the heart. So that's why we do this podcast. It's one of the reasons why I love doing small group coaching, because people in small group coaching, because the group is small, they're able to find the sense of belonging. And I encourage you to start small. Like, we want to belong in a group of 500 at a conference. That's a harder task. Shauna Shapiro talks about ridiculously unambitious goals. I'm like, yeah, do the group coaching with less than 10 people, or come to a retreat with 6 people. Like, those are where, if you want to practice belonging, and then you're building the strength. What you practice grows, and what you don't practice recedes. And the other thought I have is, like, you don't really have to feel like you belong in a group of 500. Like, we just need to feel like we belong as humans on this planet. And you're not going to belong in every setting. And that there's a clue there too, that some settings you don't want to belong in, and that's okay too. And so just choosing places where you feel like you belong, and where you can grow this belonging. And that's probably what I did learn from my year of I belong anywhere. I'm like, actually, there are some places I don't belong, and that's okay too. That was one of my biggest learnings. So I encourage you, come to a small group women's retreat, do small group coaching. All of those are practices of belonging, and Connect in Nature is also an incredible place to belong. And they will all be experiences that will, I think, inch you towards this place that we're, and I'm actually going to celebrate it now today, that this is no longer an issue. And I want to offer the possibility and hope for all of you that it doesn't have to be the way you move through the world, even though it was the way we were trained to work.
And if you've already chosen that you get to choose where you do and do not belong, then celebrate that too.
And lean into it. So where you feel like you belong and you've chosen, do more of that. Strengths-based, right? Because we're sometimes like, well, I have to do the hard thing and challenge myself and go into the place I don't feel like I belong and belong there. And I'm like, only if you want to. Like, ask yourself if you really do want to belong there. Because to me, that was a very hard, courageous thing to do, is decide there are spaces that they're not the right fit, right? And it's not that I feel uncomfortable or I'm selling myself short. It's actually like aligned and authentic.
Yeah. So there's choice.
Yes.
There's choice in belonging, and also choice in not belonging.
Yes.
Yeah.
And don't not belong by default.
So as always, we like to close our episodes with some reflection questions for you.
Where do you keep waiting to belong? Where could you decide that you want to already belong?
Where are you spending your time, energy, and emotional currency? And are those spaces places that you've intentionally chosen?
And when you walk into a room where you feel different, what might happen if you started to notice what's actually the same about you, if you want to?
Belonging is something you decide and you choose. It isn't something you wait to feel.
Thank you all so much for listening to us today. We hope that you have gleaned some gold nuggets of wisdom and at least had a few laughs alongside us. And we would love, love, love it if you left us really reviews, because they make a bigger difference than stars. So lean in and give us a good review, especially if you've been listening for a long time. It helps other people find us, and it helps give us the nudge to keep going. And we would also love to have you join us for Connect in Nature, which is coming up quite soon. Join me for a small coaching group. There are none actually happening over the summer because I'm taking my pause, but they will all start up again towards the end of August and go through the fall. But now is the time to start planning ahead and figuring out which one you want to join. And if you want to join small group coaching but want to do some one-on-one coaching attached to it, which many people do, you can start that over the summer. That's what a lot of people do over the summer. Or come to Nicasio and join me for a retreat. They are the ways that are going to help you decide and choose to belong, and decide and choose to belong in an authentic and aligned space where you actually want to belong. Remembering that we can support one another and connect, introduce yourself, introduce other people to each other, and practice belonging and see what happens. We would love to have you share your feedback on that too. So send us an email. You can respond to any of the podcast emails that go out or the Mindful Healthcare Collective emails that go out. Give us your tips and tools, and we can add them to a future podcast. We will see you all next week.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find Ni-Cheng Liang at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence.
Welcome to today's Mindful Moment. Today, we will explore feelings of belonging and not belonging. Taking in a big deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And bring a hand to heart if it's safe to do so. And close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And connect to your breath, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And notice for a moment when I simply talk about not belonging, if you feel any tension, potentially in your throat, a lump in your throat, chest pressure. The sympathomimetic activation may be, even though you are hand on heart, and even though your eyes are closed. Notice how this feels. And then notice how you feel with the idea that you do belong. Wherever it is you would like to belong, you can belong. What would it feel like to move through the world noticing how you fit in? What's the same about you? What would it feel like to move through the world deciding there was nothing wrong with you? Focusing on what's cool about you, what you bring to this world that no one else can, what's unique, what's special, what you love. Taking a few moments to soak in what it feels like to decide for just this moment to belong. And if that feeling feels far away, think about a space where you feel like you belong. Maybe it's in your home, maybe it's with your partner, maybe it's with children, maybe there's a friend. In their presence, you feel like you belong. Remember what that feeling feels like. Breathing in and breathing out. Noticing perhaps a sense of peace or ease. Maybe the breath is flowing a little bit more. Let yourself enjoy it. Deepen the breath. Lengthen the inhale and the exhale. Massage that top hand on the bottom hand. Enjoy the sensations. And notice if any of the tight spots have softened. How might you take this lens of curiosity and non-judgment and peace and ease with you out into the world? What might it feel like to notice where you fit in, how you fit in, what's the same about you? When you're ready, you can lower your hands and open your eyes, and we'll come back together. Have a beautiful week, noticing all the spaces in which you belong.